Hello and welcome to Janette's TV podcast. I'm your host, Janette Burke. Today we're back at you again virtually from the Santa Barbara Film Festival celebrating its 40th year with another premiere film that showcased in the festival called Incandescence by Canadian documentary filmmaker Novi, whose work includes Metamorphosis, Planet 911, and Say I Do, and Canadian filmmaker Velcrow, whose work includes Metamorphosis, Planet 911, Fierce Light Trilogy, and Bones of the Forest. Now, this documentary film explores wildlife devastation, survival, and Indigenous wisdom through immersive footage and first-hand accounts. Before we welcome Nova and Velcrow and start today's interview, I want to remind you that if you haven't already done so, please take a moment to subscribe to Janette's TV Podcast YouTube channel for more great lifestyle and entertainment content like this, geared towards savvy women over 40. That link to join us is below. So what was it like to have your film accepted at the Santa Barbara Film Festival?
Well, it was great. I mean, we love the Santa Barbara Film Festival. We've been there before with our previous film, Metamorphosis, in 2018. And the film was invited before the fires happened in Los Angeles. So it was very timely that to screen the film at this particular moment. We love that festival. We love the town. So it was just a great place to share the film with U.S. audiences for the first time.
Yeah, it was our U.S.
Mhm.
premiere, so we really Santa Barbara's a big fest. It's on the Oscar circuit, so it's a really good U.S. launching point for us. So we've always had a great time there, and it's the audiences at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival are so appreciative and so enthusiastic and such cinephiles.
Mhm. And how does that compare, let's say, to like other festivals, including the ones in Canada?
Well, every festival has their own unique identity and character, based on, how they curate their films. I wouldn't want to generalize, it's just really depending on every town has a different type of festival, and even communities within one town, everyone has a different type of festival. So it's really hard to generalize between, Santa Barbara and Canada.
But I
Right.
will say that the Santa Barbara Film Festival has a wonderful
Mm.
combination of high-profile, dramatic fiction films and celebrities, and also very high-quality documentaries. And so, those kinds of festivals are actually hard to get documentary into because there aren't so many slots for our kind of feature docs in a fiction festival like that. So it's an extra honor to be able to get into a festival like that because it brings a different kind of audience, a broader audience.
Also, the
Okay.
proximity to Los Angeles and Hollywood, I guess, brings top name actors to the festival that
Mhm.
we wouldn't normally be able to share a space with. So that was really a highlight for us as well, is to
Mhm.
be able to hear, some of the tributes that were. Some of the tribute events that happened at Santa Barbara, and be able to hear actors such as Zoe Saldana, for example, Adrian Brody, Guy Pearce talk about their craft. And so that was really special.
Yes, this is my first time being media accredited for this festival, and I really would have loved to get down to Santa Barbara and not have to do my interviews virtually from Toronto, but it didn't work out for me this year. But yeah, I get you. I was pretty impressed by that too. You know what else is very impressive is that every single morning that I woke up between February 5th to the 15th, which was the duration of the festival, every single morning they had all the pictures, all the photos, all the red carpet stuff ready to go right for you, which that's really refreshing for me. I thought that was really impressive. Let's get back to your film, your documentary, and let's talk about, you mentioned that it was shown now, and that it was sort of like appropriate because the timing was around the wildfires. Is there any connection to the wildfires that happened in LA that you can speak of, or is it just sort of coincidence that this tragedy
Well,
happened around the same time that your film was screened?
sure, the film was programmed long before the actual wildfires happened, so the programmers
Mhm.
would not have known. But Incandescence is a universal film, and the story of what happens to the land and communities in the wake of wildfires is being played out around the world as we see with the climate crisis more and more, even cities burning. And so there were survivors of the wildfire in the audience at Santa Barbara, and they were really moved by the film. They felt like it really appropriately represented the stories that were covered.
And so, how were you able to get involved in this film and bring these stories to life?
Well, we first started thinking about making this film about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, when we were socked in by wildfire smoke where we live. And the fire that was happening was really far away. And so it was the first time that we were really experiencing firsthand the impacts of a wildfire. And so we thought, this is something that we would love to explore in a deep way through our filmmaking process. And so we shared the idea with the National Film Board of Canada. And they decided that they wanted to develop it with us. And so we did that together. And then we filmed over the course of 2 wildfire seasons. We wanted to make a place-based film. And so we based the film in the Okanagan region of Canada, which is the most fire-prone region of Canada. And we kept going back there over the course of the 2 years through the seasons to see how a wildfire impacts communities, wildlife, and how first responders, the firefighters, deal with these recurring events, climate events.
Now,
And
speaking
it
of the
was really,
communities and how they're affected, I wanted to ask you if the women in those communities deal with managing wildfires differently because they're trying to keep the fabric of the community together, and they're often also linked with children. So, how do you see them handling it, and even maybe even if they're involved as firefighters?
well, one of the subjects that we followed over time, she's a single mom and she's got 3 kids, and her house burnt down as a result of the White Rock Lake fire. And over the course of making the documentary, she decided that she wanted to train to become a firefighter so that she could um, help other people who had gone through what she had been through and maybe prevent that from happening to them. So, we're really seeing, how a woman can take action and really be resilient in the face of a wildfire.
And another thing that this Tiffany talks about um, was right after the fire, 3 days after they were allowed back, and there she was with her family, and she just felt that she needed to keep it together for them. Like she had to hold it together. And I think this is something that we see time and time again. In fact, we're making a film right now called Emergence, which is actually all women in the film, and that women can be incredibly resilient and are actually can be a grounding force in these crisis situations.
Yeah. So, do you think they're like better equipped to handle crisis than, let's say, the male counterparts?
I think that they handle crisis in a different way.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Um, you know, uh, they're really focused on strength and community, and really making sure that their families are a priority. Also, communication. The communication is different. So,
In what
we
way?
see. Well, I guess in terms of really, um, instead of like In the case of um, first responders, for example, maybe women can communicate in a way that's more about connecting with people and like
Mm,
really listening, as opposed
mm,
to telling people what to do.
mm.
So that's something that, we've discovered in our work.
Okay, so now let's talk about the generational effect the wildfires will have, because it's going to leave an impact. And where do you see that impact going and the generational effect, particularly with Indigenous communities?
Well, one of our subjects in Incandescence is actually an elder, and this is a bit of a different approach. But she is a fire keeper, and she does
Mhm,
this practice called cultural burning. And for
mhm,
thousands of years, the indigenous people have actually managed the forest ecosystem with fire, with these low intensity fires, which burns
mhm,
out the fuel and prevents mega fires from coming through, opens up the
mhm,
forest for wildlife as well, and it
mhm,
doesn't hurt the soil and protects their homes. And they've started doing this again. And so Dora is passing that wisdom on to her children. And so they're with connecting with their traditional past. Some of the indigenous people that we witnessed are becoming, returning to that culture and actually starting to work now with the wildfire agencies who are realizing actually this complete suppression model in the past and the outlawing of cultural burning was a mistake. And they're now starting to work together in this Okanagan region, which is featured in the film, and do these cultural burns. So there's this generational passing on of wisdom, and on the one hand. And then, of course, there's the other hand of the trauma and the generational trauma, which is the other
right.
side of it.
Would you like to speak to the trauma as well? I mean, I really am really like enthralled with your last response regarding this ancient practice and how modern management of wildfires can really learn from that practice. But now you did mention the long-term trauma, and I just wanted to know if you would like to comment on that as well.
Well, one of the subjects that we talk to in the film is a school teacher.
Mm,
And she talks about her role in helping with her students who are going
mhm,
through the trauma of losing their homes,
mm,
and how important it is to support them and to support the families who are going
mhm,
through this. And that's one of the things that, when we hear about wildfires in the news, in the media, once the fire is over, we don't hear about it anymore. And it's really
mhm,
important to follow up with people and people who've been impacted and making sure that they have the support that they need because trauma isn't over in one day. It's a
yeah, mhm,
long-term experience. And so that's something to keep in mind, especially with the younger generations that are going through this, that we have to
right, because
keep
there could be a lasting impact. And
exactly.
do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
think that, like, what do you think, whether in the United States or Canada or really anywhere in this world where wildfires present themselves as a problem, what do you think could be better with our governmental systems in these countries to handle these crises and make sure that the people who are affected by them do have enough support post
Mhm.
crisis?
Yeah. Well, we do need to really support communities in recovery, and
But
we
how
need to.
so?
Well, there's a number of different ways. The gu- one of the first things is that the resources that are being put into putting out fires,
Mhm,
some of that needs to be put into preventing fires, and not nearly
uh-huh,
enough is done on the process of prescribed burns and creating safe zones and teaching communities to fire smart. So that's very important. And
mhm,
then in terms of recovery, recovery is, we're in this climate emergency and we're going to see constant climate disasters, and we're going to need to put aside resources to support people from recovering. And we're having a insurance crisis right now. Climate change
mhm,
is causing an insurance crisis in that houses are becoming uninsurable, so we're having increasingly uninsured houses out there. Some of
mhm,
this is not going to be possible or is just not going to happen for the governments to respond to. So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
also have to develop strong community-based mutual aid support where people come together and support their neighbors. In our film, we feature the Mennonite disaster group who come in with volunteers from across Canada, not all Mennonites, who come in and help to rebuild homes for people who were uninsured, who could not afford to rebuild their homes, and they'll build them a home for free. And they raise funds for that. They get donations, and they just volunteer their labor. They're all skilled carpenters and they can build houses, and they came into the one of the communities and built 5 homes for people whose homes were destroyed. So there's this is a
Oh, that's
multi,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. We also see a volunteer organization called the Animal Lifeline Emergency Response Team, or ALERT,
Mm-hmm.
and their role is to rescue animals who are impacted by wildfires, who are left behind, or who need
Mm-hmm.
to be taken care of because they can't leave. And so that's another aspect of response that is needed.
Mhm. And
Yeah.
there's
And
also a lot of emotional trauma and psychological um, anxiety coming down the pipeline, actually for all of us, because there's this thing called climate anxiety, and we're all feeling it. So we also need to be looking to emotional and psychological support, counseling, that sort of thing needs to be available
mhm.
for people. And for the just to come back to the next generation aspect,
Uh-huh.
this is
Hmm.
really impacting the youth and the young people. We're parents ourselves. We have a son, Fat Cat, goes by Fat Cat, and he was on the journey with us of making this film. And we kind of have to help him process because sometimes he has nightmares about fires burning down his town. So this is
Uh-huh.
what we're all living with today. So we
So
need to.
maybe you could give a tip, like for, any parent listening, how to
Mhm.
handle that, how they could um teach their children or support their children, like some type of advice on how to approach that whole
Sure.
topic.
I think for all of us, it's how do we find the hope in every story?
Hmm.
And one of the things that Mr. Rogers says is in a crisis, look for the helpers.
Hmm.
And and that's what really kept us inspired in making this film on such a challenging subject. We were spending time with the most amazing people you could imagine. The firefighters are incredible people who put themselves on the line to save communities. So when you're looking to the helpers and perhaps becoming one yourself, that'll give you meaning and hope in tough times.
And what is the main message you want then for audiences to take away from this film when they go see it? And in particular, even the women that are seeing it, since we cater a lot to savvy women over 40. So what would be the message that you would want them to get out of this movie?
Mm. Well, we really wanted to explore our relationship to fire in this film, which is very complex.
Hmm.
Fire isn't all bad. There's also good fire, and we have to learn how
Hmm.
to respect it and
Hmm.
to work with fire. And that includes, looking to our indigenous communities and how they have worked with fire for thousands of years, and really just exploring that and looking at how we as a community can build our community together, sort of to face these crises and move through it together. That's one of the things that we've discovered in the process of making this film, is that community is really important, and to really work on that so that if and when these disasters happen, then we know who are the most vulnerable, who needs help, who to reach out to, how to make a plan together as a community. Those are some of the things that are really important to walk away with, I hope.
And what can we do to actually prevent the fires?
Hmm. Well, on an individual level, in Canada, and it's called Fire Smart. In the US, there's FireWise. And these are great services that the governments provide where you can have somebody come and to your house and they'll have a look at it and say, here's what you need to do to make this what the firefighters would call a defensible space. And you can do that to protect your home so that it's less likely to burn in the event of a fire. And you see all the time in wildfire scenarios where there's homes, all these homes burned, and then, oh, this home did not burn. Why was that?
Mhm.
Because they
Mhm.
had managed to take measures to make their home safe. So that's one thing. And we can do fire smarting as an entire community. So we can encourage our town councils, our mayors to implement community-wide fire smart processes. And then at the provincial level, we can really encourage our politicians to like put the resources into making our communities safe, because that's really important.
Mhm. But now, just to follow up on that point, and this will be the last point before we talk about how we can see this film, this documentary, and the point is this, or rather, the question is this: is this seen as a global crisis, or is it seen as sort of like, well, I don't live in California, this doesn't affect me, or I don't live in the Okanagan Valley of BC, and this doesn't affect me? How do we make it something that is actually a global concern that really does affect everyone?
Well, we're all impacted by the climate crisis, and wildfires are one example of how we're all experiencing this, no matter where you live. They're happening all over the world. And like I said, we first experienced the smoke coming from the fire that was really far away. New York was socked in by wildfire smoke that was coming from Canada. It's something that is affecting people globally. It's not just isolated incidents. And the arc of a fire is something that's universal. Uh,
Mhm.
it's not an isolated incident.
Okay, so now where can we go to see your documentary
Incandescence.
other
You can
than, I
see
mean,
it.
obviously some of us didn't make it to the Santa Barbara Film Festival. So I assume that it's either going to be released or released soon, or you're going to be on the tour, right? The what do they call it? The film festival tour.
We'll
Yes.
be doing that. We'll be going through the film festival circuit. We've already done a Toronto screening, but we haven't done a Vancouver screening yet. That'll be coming up. Right next 2 weeks, we're doing a tour to all the communities, a theatrical release tour to all the communities that are featured in the film. And then
Oh,
eventually, you can look for it on the NFB website where it will stream free like all NFB
In
productions
Canada.
in Canada.
But for anyone outside of Canada, the best thing to do is to follow the National Film Board's social media, and it'll be updated with how the film can be made available outside of Canada.
And you can go to nfb.ca and search for the name of the film, and there'll be information there too.
okay. So let's say the name of the film one more time because we want everyone to find it. Go ahead.
Incandescent. Incandescence.
Incandescent. Incandescent. Okay. Well, it's been lovely chatting with both of you, and I really hope that this project brings light to communities that really need this information. So thank you so much. Thanks for being with us today on Janette's TV podcast. I'm your host, Janette Burke. Please remember to like, comment, and share all our posts with your fellow savvy women over 40. And remember, you can support us in one of two ways: a donation to our Patreon account. That link is also below. No donation is too big or too small as we continue to bring you the best lifestyle and entertainment content geared towards savvy women over 40 on the net. You can also purchase a Janette's TV podcast t-shirt or sweatshirt in your favorite color and size with either the JTV podcast logo and tagline or an inspirational saying made by me and a previous guest in a previous episode. The choice is yours. All orders contain shipping and handling and are conveniently sent straight to your front door. Again, this is Janette Burke, your host, signing off. Until next time, continue to be savvy and fabulous.